Okay, well, let me just start by welcoming you, Dr. Haber. Your work has inspired me. I have been watching you do your Facebook's lives and all your videos. And as somebody who puts out a lot of video content, I know how hard it is. I can feel your passion and I feel your heart for what you're trying to do for women. So I just want to welcome you to my podcast and say thank you. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
I'm just so excited to be here because, again, I've been watching you, following you, and just love your communication style and how effective you are at inspiring women to look at themselves, habits, changes so that they can live a healthier life and not accept the status quo. So, yeah let's do this.
So I'm going to start this off with over the last couple of days, I've been diving into your book, and I got to tell you that one of the threads of thought that keeps coming to me is we needed this book. Like, I'm 54. I needed this book when I was 40. I know when I was in practice working with lifestyle with women, like this book was needed 20, 30 years ago. And I'm so happy you wrote it now and the lens from which you wrote it from. But I also feel like there's this cracking open of a cultural conversation that's happening around menopause. There's like an empowered feeling that women are starting to embrace because of books like this. So what is it that's happening in this moment around the conversation of menopause that wasn't happening decades ago?
You know, when I look at the options that our mothers and grandmothers had, and when they got to our age in their 50s, it was like, this is as good as it's going to get. And they just calmly accepted what the world offered to them by and large, which ended up with them having 20% of their lives spent in poorer health than their male counterparts, 3 to 4 times higher risk of Alzheimer's, much higher risk of fragility, and ending up 3 to 1 needing long-term care facilities for extended period of times more than their male counterparts. Our generation, the elder millennials and the Gen Xers like us, because I'm 55, are saying absolutely not. Like, this is not okay. And how we approach, study, and conceptualize our menopause, which is from the last menstrual period until we die, okay? They know that if we just stay on the path that has been laid out for us by society, by how medicine treats us as females as we age, is going to lead to these poor outcomes, and we're not willing to put up with it. And this is the exciting part of what I'm doing is, yes, I'm getting some pushback from the establishment. You know what? That's okay. Take me out for it. I don't care, because I know that we are the menopause. The messages that we're giving women that are resonating with them are leading to change in their habits and health and options that are going to lead to better quality of life as they age.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, I really want to move into in this conversation, when you look at the symptoms of menopause, what I see that gets highlighted and profiled and media grabs onto, although that this is changing, is hot flashes.
Right.
But I can tell you, as a 54-year-old woman, like, hot flashes was, it was a thing. But can we talk about the mental changes that happen throughout the menopausal journey? Because those were the changes that were affecting every relationship in my life. So when I look at the research and about how these estrogen receptor sites are still very active in us post-menopausal, what is that telling us about menopause and how we need to do it different?
Okay. So let's back up to the first part of your statement of, forever it seemed like menopause treatment was defined by hot flashes. You are 100% right. Hormone replacement therapy was developed in the 40s, 50s, 60s, through that pathway, simply to get rid of hot flashes. Forever, we defined menopause symptoms by the presence or absence of vasomotor symptoms. 85% of us have them. For 20, 25, 30% of us, they're severe and life disrupting. But that was it. There was no talk around the brain changes, which led to mental health and cognition changes, the musculoskeletal changes, which, with your background, You probably know what better than anyone with arthralgias,
Yeah.
arthritis. Oh my God, frozen shoulder, all of that. Besides
frozen
skin,
shoulder,
hair, teeth, gut,
Yep.
Every single organ system in our body is affected. And the old guard, who wrote the papers on vasomotor symptoms, who really defined menopause by, and everything else that we are going through at this age was attributed to aging, nothing to do with hormone depletion. And that's where the new research is going. So the beautiful study that just got published in Nature magazine by our friend Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who's a neuroscientist who in her entire career has studied the female brain and its relation to dementia and Alzheimer's. Okay, that is what she does. She PET scans brains left and right. She's at Will Cornell. She's amazing. She is the first person in history to look at the female brain by PET scan through the menopause brains, and looked at the activity of estrogen receptors. And what we thought was estrogen receptors kind of fall off and die as we go through menopause. No, they actually upregulate. The brain is starving for estrogen. It's creating its own estrogen through peripheral conversion, of estrone to estradiol and some testosterone. It is dying for estrogen. And so the parts of the brain, the hypothalamus, pituitary, the functioning, the cognition, the memory centers are lighting up like firecrackers in postmenopause because the estrogen receptors are like, help me, we need estrogen.
Yep.
The old guard attributed we know that women are having cognition changes through menopause. They only attribute that to the loss of sleep from vasomotor disturbance. Lisa proved them dead wrong. This is literally due to the loss of estrogen in the brain that lubricates and makes everything work better. And we take that away and the brain stops dysfunctioning, all stops functioning normally. Also, we know, great research coming out of Australia, we have a 40% increased risk of mental health disorders through the menopause transition. So in perimenopause, when the levels become chaotic before they plummet, in postmenopause, that's when we see the biggest disruptions to our mental health.
Yep.
And forever, that got dismissed as this is a time in your life. You're stressed out. Teenagers are driving you crazy. Your parents are getting older. Your job is more demanding. You're not, no, it is literally the disruption of neurotransmitters in our brains due to the chaotic fluctuations of our hormone levels. And here's the third thing that Lisa's discovered, and I've seen it also in the liver literature. FSH, as we know, right, follicular stimulating hormone, which is made in our pituitary that makes us ovulate, basically, to simplify it. FSH rises in perimenopause and then gets really high in postmenopause and stays there for the rest of our life. New data is showing that those FSH alone, without the estrogen depletion, is toxic to the liver and the brain, increases the rate of Alzheimer's plaques, in the brain. Just the FSH elevations. And if we can get those FSH levels down, those processes get easier. I mean, it's just explosive what's happening right now in the menopause world. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So there's such a great explanation. So does that mean that everybody should go on hormone replacement therapy?
No, that means that everyone deserves an informed conversation about the particular benefits of hormone replacement therapy and how it may affect her life. I don't think it's for everyone. No, it's a medication. You need a full discussion of the risks and benefits. But what's happening in modern medicine is that a woman walks in with hot flashes, so classic vasomotor symptoms. She has a 10% chance of getting the diagnosis of menopause put on her chart. No periods.
It's a diagnosis. It's a diagnosis. Wait, I don't even that right. Seems like a fun
10%. So in that 10%, if she's offered treatment, 4-to-1, it's an antidepressant versus menopause hormone therapy. Only 6 to depending on who you read, 6 to 8%, depending, because we don't track the compounding pharmacies, right? So it's only the FDA approved stuff. But right now, it's 4 to 5% are getting FDA approved HRT medications of women who are eligible.
Yep.
So do I think all women need it or want it or whatever? No, but I think everyone deserves an informed conversation, not only about the risks and not only about hot flashes, but about the cardioprotective and neuroprotective benefits.
Yeah, I love that thought. And the way you phrased it is that every woman deserves an informed conversation, which is amazing. Now, I will tell you what I've seen not only in my clinical practice, but in our online community is that there's no one size fits all when it comes to HRT.
Right.
And we can't, and this is what I love about your books is like, and this is the lens in which I see things, is we can't leave lifestyle out of this conversation. No. So what I just want to make sure the women that are listening to this is, as exciting as this is, it doesn't mean you put a patch on and life's going to be like how it was at 30.
I wish.
Right.
I mean, I've had to completely overhaul my nutrition, my movement strategies, my stress reduction, my boundaries, my, I think I'm like you in that, I'm 55, I'll be 56 in about a month. I literally am living my best life. I have
me too.
Better relationships,
yeah,
better intimacy, better health.
Yes.
I'm wealthier. I'm helping more women than I've ever helped in my life. Super proud of my past and everything I've done. But this is it. And I want everyone to feel that way, right? At my age and beyond. But had I not overhauled how I eat, how I think, how I move, my pharmacological choices, I wouldn't be here today.
Yes. Amen to that. And here's what I love about my conversation with Lisa that's bleeding into this conversation is that as I was going through my perimenopausal years, I kept trying to figure out what's going on with my brain. And I brought guests on to my podcast, one of which was Dr. Amen, who I love. But when I asked him what's going on with the female brain, he said, well, it was because you weren't meant to live that long. And I thought, well, that's a horrible answer. I think I want to live to 100. So that's a horrible answer. So when I brought Lisa on, she talked about how the brain changes and brought up this idea of the grandmother hypothesis and how our brain actually becomes a more highly functioning brain post-menopausal years. That amygdala calms down. It starts to be more empathetic. We can see the bigger picture. And when I saw that, my brain was like, so basically the brain changes that are happening in menopause are setting us up to be cultural leaders. That women in their post-menopausal years are their absolute best, to your point, living their best lives. But that's not the message that's getting sent down to women.
No, it's like you're developing Alzheimer's at a higher rate because you live longer, and that is not true. That is absolute false.
Yes. So if we were to take a woman at 40 and say, here's what's coming down the road, here's what I recommend you do so that you can land at 55 and 54 where I'm at, and we both are at, living your best life. What advice would you give?
So I have a little talk that I do that's like what I would tell my 35-year-old self. So roughly the same thing. Nutrition over calories. This whole cultural, I grew up with it. My whole life, I worked out to be thin and I ate to be thin. Those were my two goals because thin meant healthy. Okay. Certainly being thin is more healthy than being morbidly obese. My genetics was never going to allow that to happen to me. It'd be almost impossible. Okay. To be morbidly obese. So I have been privileged for that. But I just focused on calorie counts. That's all they taught me in medical school. I knew about kwashiorkor and scurvy and severe vitamin deficiencies and stuff, but basic day-to-day nutrition, I went back to school at like 48 to learn about nutrition.
Wow.
And then incorporate that into my practice, which, then I wrote into a book. But so, really focusing on nutrition over calories. Are you getting enough fiber? So like I have a few tenets that I focus on. Foods rich in fiber also are rich in so many other things, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, so it's like you're killing multiple birds with one stone. But most women in the US are only getting about 10 grams of fiber per day. Great studies coming out looking at cognition and fiber intake. In elderly patients, looking at fiber intake and gut health. I mean, we all, most of us know that now. And so women should be getting minimum 25. The health benefits for at least cognition seem to max out around 32 grams per day. That's 3 times what most women are getting. So nuts, seeds, legumes, crunchy vegetables, fiber, berries, getting food rich in that rather than just like, oh, low cal, like how much fiber are you getting?
Yes.
How much magnesium are you getting? What's your vitamin D level? Like looking at those things and the rest kind of falls into place. And then you go from a place of restriction to a place of, I gotta eat more.
Okay, my baby's coming to you. Eat like a girl. You want to know the foods that will support hormones? Guess what? I have them for you already. It's a free giveaway. Just click the link above and I'll send you a list of all the foods that support amazing hormonal health.
Are you getting enough protein?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like I was not getting enough protein.
Yeah.
For sure.
What are your recommendations on protein? Because we've had some really deep discussions on this in my membership group, and people are struggling to get 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight.
So again, there's a big mental shift that has to happen. It had to happen for me. But when we look at the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative, which kind of threw out estrogen as an, optimal treatment, it's just a data set. There's really good data that came out of there. For example, they looked at fragility scores in menopausal women and protein intake. And the women who had the highest level of protein intake, about 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. So just under 1 per pound. Just looking at that, had lower fragility scores. We are not eating enough protein to counteract the sarcopenia of aging. Yeah. And so upping your protein. So I'm recommending for my patients, and I do it in kilograms. I have a body scanner in my office. I measure their muscle mass. I look at their visceral fat. And, I'm really pushing closer to that 1 gram per pound, of healthy body weight. Yeah. And because they're usually about 50 or 60. So I'm like, don't do this tomorrow. This is a transition. Okay. So we're going to, don't think you have to fix everything today. You've been living this way. We're just going to get you, let's make our goal by the end of the year. We have a 6 months to a year. Let's get you up. And so every month you're going to try to increase here, increase there. And, protein supplements can be a great segue to get there. I always prefer you to get your protein through food. Supplements are great, but they don't replace whole food and good nutrition. Yeah. And so, for my patients who are transitioning to get to these higher levels, sometimes a protein shake or some of the bars can be a great way to help them until they figure out how to incorporate more of the protein rich foods in their diet.
What would you say to the vegan?
It's tough. It's possible, but it's tough. Right? You can be healthy without HRT for the rest of your life. It's tough. It's harder. And so, all of these are not absolutes, but if you choose to be vegan, it's definitely healthier than the Western diet. We know that. Of course. But you're going to struggle. It's going to be harder for you to get the recommended amount of protein to avoid the frailty as you get older. The goal is not to be thin. The goal is to stay out of a nursing home.
Oh my God, that's so that you need to say that
is what I talk to my patients all day long. I'm like, let's get rid of the acute problems. Let's get rid of the hot flashes, the night sweats, the brain fog, those things that brought you here. And then we're going to set a course for the next 30 years. Okay. Yes. And what are your goals? What does your mom look like? And look, if their mom is kicking ass at 95 and going to the grocery store and driving herself and playing with grandkids, I'm like, let's do what she does. Okay. Yes. But if your mom, like mine, is frail and demented at 80, I'm like, we're not going to do what she did. Let's look at what we can change, because that's your genetics.
That. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So that number 1 is nutrition. What, anything
movement.
else?
Okay. So movement. All right. I worked out to be thin. Cardio, pick up some weights. We cannot counteract the effects of sarcopenia of aging without resistance training, most of us. Yeah. And so the majority of what I do is not focused on cardio. I do some cardio, of course. I set up I have a walking gym. My treadmill is a working desk. And so I walk while I work on an incline with my weighted vest. So I love the weighted vest as a hack. They're cheap. They have multiple sizes. You want to start with about 10%, but great studies done in the elderly of us, which is 9 years away for me, by the way. And looking at prevention, like improvement in their balance, in their strength, and in their bone density scores. Great data on weighted vests with protein intake, sometimes vibratory training. There's lots of little hacks and things that we can do, but really focusing on strong over skinny.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Strong over skinny.
I just got a weighted vest. I just told my husband this morning, I'm like, I'm a wrecker now. And he's like, what? I'm going to start wrecking. I'm like, it even has a fancy fun name.
It's a form of wrecking. I like that it distributes the weight evenly over the shoulders rather than just all on your back. And so my husband is all into it now. So we have 6 of them. So in different levels.
How much? So I can tell you in putting my own exercise variation together that I've definitely found weightlifting to be great, but I've also found walking to be
Yeah.
incredible, especially when my brain's on fire. So what would give us a view of what like a week would look like as far as exercise
Sure.
variation?
So I recommend to my patients, for as far as cardio goes, we want about 150 minutes a week. That seems to be kind of the tipping point. And most of that in zone 2, a little bit, do a few sprints here and there. You don't have to do much to get the VO2 max up. So like shoot for about 150 minutes a week of cardio. So that's like 5 walking sessions for 30 minutes a week, or 45 minutes if you have to crunch it down. And then 2 to 3 days of progressive load resistance training, a push day, a pull day, just making sure you're hitting everything. Don't forget about stretching, and don't forget about balance. Those are the things that are going to decrease our risk of an osteoporotic fracture. And so, and if that happens, go ahead.
No, and what about yoga? Because like Sarah Gottfried's
yoga,
a good
depending
friend.
on the type, stretching, balance, and if you're doing a lot of vinyasa and you're getting a lot of, you see yoga arms all the time. These women are ripped.
It's
and
like
so again,
resistant.
Yoga can be fantastic for relaxation, for stress reduction. It's just, we must also push our muscles. So you have to do the more aggressive forms of yoga to get that to happen.
Okay, great. Okay, so second is movement.
Mm-hmm.
What's after that?
So nutrition, strong over skinny, nutrition over calories, educate yourself, learn our books, there's so much great information out there, websites, whatever, and realize you don't have to accept the status quo. But if you probably don't change the habits you've got right now at 30, for most of us, this is not going to go as well as it could for you through this aging process.
Yes.
That includes menopause.
Yes.
And,
agreed.
Changing your mindset around how you look to how you feel. And so looks are important again, but it should not be the primary driver of the choices for your health.
Yeah, I continually say that I feel like I'm partnering with my 100-year-old self. Like literally every day, I'm like, what do I need to do today to make my 100-year-old self proud? And if I always keep her in mind in my day-to-day, I know I'm going to love 100 when I get there. So I like where you're going with your thought process on that.